Schlock and Awe Films.
All right, it is Wednesday, so we're heading down south for this week's dose of what the fuck. And we're going to talk about a filmmaker who I'm not a huge fan of, but I respect, and that's Herschel Gordon Lewis. A lot of people call him the Godfather of Gore. He was one of the first people to realize that, like, you can bring back kind of the Grand Guignol style of performance with gore and torture, and people will flock to that kind of stuff because we are all lizard brains. Before Blood Feast, which was his first like big commercial hit, he had done stuff like Nudie Cutie movies, the Nudist Camp movies. He was coming out of that world where like Russ Meyer and Doris Wishman also came out of. And he was doing like industrial films, sort of same thing as like George Romero. He made Black Love, which was a hardcore African-American porno movie. And he did Blood Feast, and it was a huge hit in Florida in the drive-in scene, and played all over the country in the drive-ins and the grindhouses. And that led him to a larger career in films like The Gore Girls, Color Me Blood Red, Wizard of Gore, and then this one today, 2000 Maniacs, which the band 10,000 Maniacs in the 80s and 90s actually got their name from this. And then Robert Englund was in the sequel/remake they did in the early 2000s, which was 2001 Maniacs, and he plays the mayor in that one of this literal ghost town. I would say this movie is, if you're not familiar with Exploitation, which is, grindhouse movies, drive-in movies that kind of exploit the South. You'd have something like Scum of the Earth, Child Bride, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Tobe Hooper said this movie was a huge influence on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But what I found, again, not a huge Herschel Gordon Lewis fan. This movie, he had his biggest budget, so he definitely had more to work with, and there's a lot more vibrant colors than in some of his other movies. If you ever saw Juno, the movie Juno, the movie that they're watching is where the girl's being like cut in half, but the table saw is Wizard of Gore, when he tells Elliot Page that it's way better than Suspiria. That's Herschel Gordon Lewis. It was all blood and ripped out tongues and ripped off arms. So this movie, fits into that kind of exploitation subgenre, and it's weird, especially at this time period, because when this movie was made, we're still in the middle of the civil rights movement, and media at large, you watch the news as to what was going on down there at that point. And then even like in Jim Crow law at that time. And again, I'm a white dude. I haven't spent a ton of time in the South. I just know what I've been told from people who lived through it, and books I've read and movies I've seen. When you see the Confederate flag a bunch in this movie, and it's being gleefully waved by the townspeople, who are all real townspeople there. They filmed it in St. Cloud or St. Paul, I don't know, what St. something in Florida. I knew I wrote it down as to where it was when I was watching it, because they thanked them at the end. They used all just regular people to be in this thing. The lead who plays the sheriff had never done film work before. He was a stage actor, and Herschel Gordon Lewis only hired him because he could do like any type of inflection that he wanted in a Southern accent. But you just have all these people who are there who are just like having a really good time being in a movie and smiling and waving their Confederate flags. And but there are also times when there's like the gore scenes, and like some of the extras are like old ladies, and they're looking at the camera like, what is happening? What is going on? But there's something charming about that, and what undercuts the angle of the Confederacy and all this kind of stuff is everyone in this town is a ghost, and the town was massacred by the North as they came through during the Civil War. So their ghosts are out for revenge, and they create all these detour signs because they, even though they're all Civil War ghosts, They know how to drive cars, and they know like where the new roads are. Even though like a lot of Florida, didn't really get built up until later, but sure, whatever. They also, even though they know the land so well, one dude just falls in quicksand and dies. Quicksand is not something you need to worry about. I always see these things online where they're like, I was really worried about quicksand when I was a kid, and I was like, why? I've never even seen quicksand before in real life. But I was saying, like, at the time, the media was portraying the South as kind of bumpkins, rednecks, inbred, whatever, and they were always the butt of the joke. This movie plays on the concept of Southern hospitality, but the Southern hospitality is the joke. The people who get lost and wind up in this town that are from the North, Yankees, they're welcome. You're the guests of honor in our centennial celebration. It's all about you, and everybody's excited to see them and happy and carry them off on their shoulders. But they're sacrifices. It's like the Wicker Man. So that's the joke when it comes to the idea of Southern hospitality. Is there is that level underneath of the smiling, like, my word, I got the vapors, to the darkness that was going on at that time. Now, they don't portray this one as like, we want to own slaves. These are people who just don't like the North. And the idea of people from the outside wandering into the wrong place of Southern people or whatever, is a trope that's been followed through in media to this day. You see a million movies like that. You go to like things like The Hills Have Eyes or something like that. The outsiders always coming into this weird world and their strange ways. And what you find out is that each one of these people who comes there are going to be sacrifices to get back at the North for massacring them. And they only find out about it because two of them get away and they find a rock with a plaque on it that says like what happened there, and then they put it together that they're ghosts. This movie also has an amazing song. Before I'd ever seen this movie, I used to have I did the review maybe 2 years ago of Mad Ron's Previews from Hell, and the trailer is on it, and the trailer has the theme song that's The South is Gonna Rise Again or something like that. Here, just listen to it. It'll be stuck in your head. Hold on. Now, see? Was I right or was I right? Yeah, I mean, the acting is bargain basement. The gore is pretty ridiculous. It's on brand with Blood Feast. But he does do some very interesting camera stuff with this one. There's a lot of POV, which is kind of cool, especially the barrel roll. They tell this one guy, like, oh, you're the star of the barrel roll, coming to the thing. And they're like, oh, okay. And he gets into this barrel, and they start jamming nails down into it, and then they push him down the hill. And as he's flipping around, he's being scratched, cut up by the nails and stuff like that. But he puts the camera in there at one point, and it's really well done. There's also a couple times when, like, you're the POV of the girl who's being held down, and there's a giant boulder above it, and they're trying to hit like a target with a baseball to make the rock fall on her and crush her. That's when there's the scenes where after the girl's blood's all over the place. There's like two grandmas in the scene, like, why are we here? Like, another girl gets her arm cut off, and then they have the big barbecue that night, and they're like, what are you eating? It's like, oh, it's a special recipe from the South, Connie Mason is in it, who was also in Blood Feast. She was a 1960s Playboy playmate. And the Tom whatever who plays the lead guy, he's a teacher, keeps talking about he's a teacher and he's hitchhiking to a teachers convention in Atlanta. I was like, 60s were a different time. But no, the colors are very vibrant. He definitely had more money on this one and more freedom, and probably not paying like real actors, just getting this town to do it. and apparently the town still very much looks the same down there. I don't know. Something Weird put out a really good version of this not too long ago that I was given as a gift, and the 4K restoration looks really good. There's just a couple scenes where the film scratches are there's nothing I can do about it, and there's also scenes where like the audio is really bad and it sounds like we're talking like this the whole time. But this is an interesting one. It's the Cramps wrote a song about this one. It's not one that I would watch a lot, but like I'm interested in the what Lewis is saying with this one without coming out and saying it, because he can't get heavy-handed with the message of something like this. But the idea of our old ghosts, be it wherever we are in this country, every group of people have done some shitty fucking shit to other groups of people. That's what we are as human beings. We're garbage. But I do like that Lewis kind of played up this idea of, the pacified, smiling Southerner, and then below the surface is something darker, and then these people kind of relishing in the torture that they're committing and laughing and dancing and playing banjo music. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting movie. And it's an interesting piece of exploitation. I've been talking to a lot of people recently and writing some reviews for some friends of mine, and they wanted something from different subgenres. And there's a documentary coming out about Bruceploitation, that after Bruce Lee died, the producers were so quick to race to get someone else to be the new Bruce Lee, like Bruce Lie and Lee Bruce and stuff like that. And that gave birth to Jackie Chan. He came out of that world. But we got into exploitation, and I was telling them about Child Bride, because Mystery Science Theater once said that it was a movie that they could not do. They're like, this is just so bizarre that there's like, we can't make this funny. It's awful. Cinema Snob, I think, did an episode on it as well. But like that, Scum of the Earth, stuff like that is just like, they're showing like these like people to be like, so we can look at them as people who live on the coast and be like, oh, look at those, look at them, and look at how they live, and it's very much the same thing with like not as raw and real as something like a Mondo Cane, where we as Anglo-Saxon Euro white people will look at the what is it, commonplace practices for people in other countries, and we judge them for how they live. It's the same thing with like Cannibal Holocaust. It's like at the end of that, people who lived in these tribes, this is their way of life. This is what they know. We choose to go and see these types of things. So in the end, when Robert Kerman says, who's the real cannibals, that's very true, because we choose to put on 24-hour news and into our echo chambers and to watch fucked up shit on YouTube or live leaks or whatever. And like, we're reverting back to that, that part of our brain, which is the Grand Guignol, the going back to Herschel Gordon Lewis. Like he goes, yeah, we could show tits or whatever on screen, but really people want the red stuff. They want to see the gore. The reason that people went to 80s slasher movies was that they wanted to see Tom Savini and Stan Winston, Rob Bottin pull off these magic tricks of like, gore and different types of kills. So that's, it's all cyclical, really. Without a Herschel Gordon Lewis, there probably wouldn't be the slasher movie as we know it. Because Psycho I don't really put in that category. Psycho and Peeping Tom came before it, and I would put them more in the psychological thriller world, whereas like something like, Blood Feast, Black Christmas, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they're in kind of that line, but there is intersecting points. There's a really cool documentary called Going to Pieces, The Rise and Fall of the Slasher Film, that kind of talks about all this stuff of how it all stems back to the Grand Guignol. People would go to the theater to watch, fake beheadings and all this kind of stuff, because we We're no different than the Romans going to watch the Christians get thrown to the lions in the Colosseum. And we like this stuff, and there's a reason that I own this movie on Blu-ray. It's not a great movie, but there's something interesting about it. There's something interesting about that time period, and the way that he was making movies, and this film has a lot of those hallmarks of that era's drive-in films. They were giving you the titillation of either the sexy girl in the bikini, like the beach movies, or the gore or the monster or something. There's always something to exploit. And at this point, they made this movie in the South where it's like, okay, racial tensions are high. The country is at war with itself. Not much has changed. And we can exploit this angle by telling this story. And I can see why it's Herschel Gordon Lewis' favorite movie in his career, because I do think it is his best made movie. I think I've definitely seen Wizard of Gore more times than this one, and Blood Feast probably too. Gore Girls I've only seen a couple times. Color Me Blood Red, I used to have a 35mm print of that one, so we would run that occasionally. But yeah, so he's one of those directors who, and his Color Me Blood Red's tagline was, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie, it's only a movie." Then Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham would steal that for Last House on the Left, which was their first one, and Craven before that was doing directing hardcore porno movies too. So it's all cyclical. It's like poetry; it rhymes, to quote George Lucas. I don't know. I'm very interested in that time period of the drive-in and of the grindhouse and of what you could make and put out there that people would go see. And I feel like that era's version of exploitation movies are so much better than what we're doing nowadays with like mockbusters like The Asylum and Wild Eye Releasing and stuff like that. I love Wild Eye Releasing. Don't get me wrong. They've done some cool shit, and I've worked with them in the past. But like that version of like, well, I guess it's kind of similar now that I mention it. Like clickbait titles are sort of this era's version of what they were doing with the drive-ins back then. So fuck me. Now I changed my own mind. I don't know. It's interesting though. It's cool to see, the progression of these things, and you watch how this thing influenced that thing, which influenced this thing, which gets us to where we are here, And I always say, like, without a 2000 Maniacs, maybe there wouldn't be a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think Peeping Tom gave Hitchcock a little bit more, oomph to do Psycho. Although, while Peeping Tom is fucking brilliant, the movie was so reviled by people that it ruined the dude's career. But go back and watch it; it's fantastic. Also, actually, watch all 4 fucking Psycho movies. Psycho 2 is fantastic, and people don't give that movie enough credit. 3 is directed by Anthony Perkins himself, who played Norman Bates. It's got like a weird giallo vibe to it, and it's very horny. The whole movie is extremely horny. Jeff Fahey doing like a fully naked like lamp thing while sitting in the hotel room. And part 4 was a made-for-TV movie. John Landis is in it. CCH Pounder is in it. And it's a flashback movie. So Olivia Hussey from Black Christmas and Turkey Shoot and Romeo and Juliet, she plays Norman's mother in it. It's telling Norman is cured in this movie, and he finds out that the woman he's with is going to have a baby, and he is afraid that he's going to lose it because of the mother angle of it. So, and it goes back and tells the story. Little boy from E.T., who is also, he's in all the Mike Flanagan stuff. He plays the young Norman in that one. Actually, the Bates Motel show was pretty good too with Vera Farmiga. And then there was a pilot for they were going to do like an anthology show of the Bates Motel, and the very first episode has Lori Petty in it as like a ghost, and the guy who plays Norman in that one is Norman dies in prison. I'm trying to remember this. See, Norman dies in prison, leaves the hotel to the guy who played Harold in Harold and Maude, which is also one of my favorite movies of all time. Cat Stevens soundtrack, fucking incredible in that movie. Yeah, no, I was thinking about it. There hasn't really been a bad, except for the Gus Van Sant shot for shot remake, which is fucking garbage. Go back and watch Psycho 2. The twist at the end of Psycho 2 is great. I remember seeing it for the first time, being like, but 3 and 4 are also really well done too. It's hard to think like how daunting a task it must have been for the director who had done like Road Games before that, and Duran Duran music videos, to be directing a sequel to Hitchcock. Like, like Gus Van Sant did it because he was an egomaniac at the time and he wanted to prove himself and he wanted to do this like art piece. And we all know how that turned out. But to do a Psycho sequel and portray it in a way that was, that honored the original, but also kind of had an 80s feel to it as well. Because the kills in it are very, like, we have to do a slasher movie thing now. And Universal's like, well, we have Psycho. We're going to have to put in some Friday the 13th stuff in there. So a little bit of that, like the kills in the basement and stuff, they stand out a little jarring, but it's fine. Tom Holland wrote it, who wrote Fright Night and created Chucky. And that has nothing to do with 2000 Maniacs. I just got sidetracked there because I was thinking about Psycho 2 the other day because somebody's like, oh, that movie sucks. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Psycho 2 is incredible. And I just remember the box art for them when I was a kid, especially part 3 where it's Anthony Perkins holding up the keys. I used to see that in the video store all the time. His son Oz Perkins directed Gretel and Hansel, which I want to review at some point too. That is a very artsy take on the Grimm fairy tale, but it is beautifully shot, and the synth score for that is fucking phenomenal. Yeah, I don't know. Herschel Gordon Lewis, man, he was almost he almost played the president for me in Die Laughing, back when my old friend Kevin and I were producing that. I had reached out to his website when he was still alive. He had just done the Ono show or something like that. He had done a movie, might have been for like Trauma or something like that, because there was a Blood Feast 2 that he did, but I've never seen it. And then there was a remake of Wizard of Gore as well, because Crispin Glover played the Wizard of Gore, the magician. This is what I do. I just talk and talk and talk off the top of my head with nonsense. My life would be so much better if I just never got involved with movie shit and was like, I'm going to focus my energy on something that matters, and maybe I'll have a girlfriend and my life will be better. Yeah, so I'd written him an email, and he got back to me, and then we stayed in correspondence until he passed away, actually. He did and he was going to come out and play the president. We were going to go film all of his scenes in one spot for this movie where he's like, the president's basically acting as the Greek choir that's pulling the story along from the outside, because we're stuck in this one spot where this zombie thing was happening. And then we were going to have Rudy Ray Moore in it as well, who was Dolomite. Eddie Murphy played him in the Dolomite Is My Name a couple years ago, which I thought was amazing, which was written by the guys who wrote Ed Wood. They also wrote Problem Child 1 and 2. So we stayed in correspondence that way, and then the last thing that he ever did, he went to Philly to do a show for Exhumed Films, and I got tickets for it because I was like, this guy ain't going to be around too much longer. And then myself and a certain redhead got into an argument, and then she didn't want to go, so I gave my tickets to somebody else, and then literally a week later he was dead. So that's my Herschel Gordon Lewis story. I don't know. This isn't a movie that I'll throw on all the time for fun, but it's interesting. It's got that catchy song, and it has its place in the parlance of grindhouse exploitation film, just like Lewis does himself as a filmmaker. Amazing taglines, amazing posters, and he made gore more acceptable in film at that point, because you get the old movies where like somebody gets shot and they fall down. I always say that PG-13 is way more is way worse for younger people, because you don't see the repercussions of violence. Where if something shows the repercussions of violence, you'll go, oh fuck, I never want that to happen. Like as a little kid, like you see a Western or a gangster movie where they would just, oh, and they're done. And then when now this is like fucking blood everywhere or something, you go like, okay, that I like watching this stuff. It's the magic trick of it all, like I was saying, of how the effect was done is cool, and there's something beautiful about all that. But in reality, I hate violence, and like I can't look at I can't look at the real shit. So I don't know. I'm a walking contradiction. Yes, all right. That's from one maniac talking about 2,000 maniacs. Let me know what your favorite Herschel Gordon Lewis movie is. Let me know what your favorite Exploitation movie is. If I had to pick one, I would probably say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, only because that is that and Dawn of the Dead are two of the greatest independent movies ever made in America. Yeah, they don't really do these much anymore. You had you had the Wrong Turn movies, but they were, I don't know if that's really the same thing. Um, could we get away with doing Exploitation nowadays? I know some of you who live in the South would probably be like, no, fuck you. Like, and but if you get triggered by seeing like the Confederate flag or something like that, just stay away from it. You're not missing anything if you don't see this movie. But if you're a completionist of it comes to Gordon's work or grindhouse movies or drive-in movies in general, there is something very important to the entire thing. In America, in the history of like American pop culture and the American landscape, the drive-in for such a long period of time was so important to America. And we're a car culture here. It's like us in Australia, like we fetishize cars almost like it's like a sexual object, Australia more so from like at least older movies, like, I mean, not older, but like Mad Max or Dead End Drive-In, stuff like that. The way that they shoot a car in a movie is like, it's like a sexy woman, the way that they shoot it, Go the director of Psycho 2, Road Games. Road Games is fucking incredible. It's Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis in the Outback, but it's basically a rear window. Hitchcock's, again, back to Hitchcock, rear window in a car. You have these wide open landscapes, but there's nowhere to hide from this killer. And that's a really cool one too. But, the drive-in was so important, and it gave us AIP and Roger Corman and Sam Sherman and Al Adamson. Like all these guys came out of that, and it was sad that there's big generations that never have seen a drive-in before, didn't know what it was. I was lucky enough as a little kid to go to a couple of them. We had the Pennsauken Drive-In, we had the Atco Drive-In when I was a kid, and they both closed by around 1990. And then there's the Mahoning Drive-In, which is where, when I used to be on the other show, we did the VHS Fest there, when I brought Freddle and Ray out with me, and then we were guests of the Joe Bob thing with the nerd and all that. And then 2 years ago, I was back there for VHS Fest again with Schlock and all, and those are really cool weekends. So if you get a chance, if there's drive-in in your area, I highly, highly recommend you go check it out, because it's a whole different experience, and it's a lot of fun. Maybe like if they show repertory films, it would be cool to see a movie like this on the big screen at a drive-in with people, and especially people who aren't so connected to this world of grindhouse movies and stuff like that. Seeing it through their eyes. I'm always interested when I show new people some weird fucking movie that I like or whatever, and watching it through their eyes and them slowly going like, oh, why did I come back to this dude's apartment? Why did I go to his movie theater after hours? He might be crazy. No, not crazy. I guess no, because if you're not if you say you're not crazy, that is something a crazy person would say. It's like if you said I'm very rich or I'm very smart. Like if you're really rich or smart, you don't have to say it. I'm still sitting here talking to myself, so I must be crazy. All right, that's it for this week. It's a ramble. I'm a rambleholic. Try not to get that song stuck in your head, and I will see you next Wednesday.